You are now listening to Black Coffee, Crime, and Crochet, a true crime podcast where cozy meets criminal, hosted by Jasmine C.L. Prince. Grab your yarn, pour up an iced coffee, let's sift through the chaos.
So on these profiles, Pierce portrayed himself as the perfect catch. Like he's handsome, he's successful, he's a businessman, he's living the dream, he's wealthy, he's excited, like he is just all the things that woman. All right, everybody, welcome back. We are now in episode 3 of Black Coffee, Crime, and Crochet. If this is your first time here, welcome. This is a true crime podcast where we sip, stitch, and spill the true on some of the most jaw-dropping cons and crimes and a little bit of murder out there. I'm your host, Jasmine C.L. Prince, and today's story is one of luxury lies, online crime, and cold brew deception. We're diving into the case of Daylon Pierce, a man who used charm, fake stock tips, and romance to scam multiple women out of their life savings. So if you've ever swiped right, you'll want to listen closely. So grab your yarn, pour something ice, and let's get into it, y'all. We already know our first segment is the iced coffee or iced drink segment. So today's sip is called the Love Bomb Latte, which I thought was pretty fitting considering what we're talking about today. It's sweet, smooth, and just suspicious enough to raise an eyebrow. So here's the recipe. You'll need 1 cup cold brew, a 1/2 cup vanilla oat milk or your milk of choice, 1 tablespoon white mocha syrup, 1 tablespoon brown sugar cinnamon syrup, a splash of almond extract, and you shake it up over ice. And then, of course, if you're trying to be fancy, top it with whipped cream and a cinnamon stick. So, it's giving, this could be love or a lie. So if you're sipping along, please snap a picture and tag me at Black Coffee Crime Crochet on Instagram. I would love to see if you make it. And then for our crochet segment, I am still working on the granny square cardigan. I'm almost done, but we're still working on it. So that's that. Let's see. Okay, that's all the beginning stuff. So let's get into it. So, who is Daylon Pierce? So, let's set the scene. It's 2015, and if you were online dating back then on Match, Plenty of Fish, Tinder, you might have come across a man named Daylon Pierce, or maybe he went by Daylon Jung. Either way, the profile was giving luxury, success, and a secure man, okay? So he was giving stockbroker, sharply dressed, business owner, investment firm CEO. Like he was doing it all. He was really painting the picture. Okay. He said he ran a company called Credit Investment Group, LLC. The profile showed him in suits, sipping cocktails, and quoting Warren Buffett. He told women he was a successful financial advisor who could help them grow their savings and a hopeless romantic looking for the right one to build an empire with. Y'all, he was even saying that he graduated from the University of Michigan. Except it was all fake. Daylon wasn't even licensed to sell investments. His so-called firm was just a name on paper. And the only thing he was investing in was himself. He was using these dating apps to cast a wide net, targeting women with money, retirement accounts, or good credit. His specialty, romance-based financial fraud. He love bomb his way into your heart and then your wallet. So, all right, let's get into his background because this plays a major role into his eventual life of crime. So, and it's also important to note that if you're going to go and look for this, the only source that I could find information on his actual background and upbringing was his American Greed episode. None of his upbringing or anything like that is publicly available online. So if you want to see what I'm talking about with his early life, you have to watch his episode of American Greed. So, and it's called Casanova Con Man. So, also, I couldn't find his actual birth date. American Greed didn't mention that. I just went through court documents and found that he was born in April of 1981. So, in this American Greed episode, again, this whole section that I'm going into is directly from American Greed. So, according to his former defense attorney, Chris Doran, I hope I'm saying that right, Daylon had a very traumatic childhood that contributed to his criminal history. And his friend, his very close friend, Heather, I believe, also, her name is Heather. She also confirms all of these details. But he recounts that his mom was addicted to crack cocaine and his dad was sent to prison when he was only 1 year old. Then, when he was 5, his mom OD'd, and not only did she OD, but he saw her die, which, come on, is tragic. Like, you're 5 years old and you see your mom OD on drugs. I can't even imagine. So after that, he was shuffled around between family members, but he eventually forms a bond with his dad's new wife, or his stepmom. Unfortunately, though, his friend Heather tells how when he was 10, it was the night before he and his stepmom were supposed to go see his dad in prison, but a man on drugs unfortunately broke into the house, raped her, and stabbed her 41 times in front of Daylon before running out of the house and leaving him just standing there. So I agree with Heather on this. She says, you would think that after losing his mom and witnessing a murder, someone would have gotten him into counseling. Unfortunately, though, no one did. So then a few years later, his dad gets out of prison and he's not out long before he's with his new girlfriend. And while they were out, his girlfriend's old boyfriend came up and shot and killed his dad. So in this little amount of time, he's a minor at this point. He's lost his mom, he's witnessed and lost his stepmom, and now his dad is killed. Like, I can't even imagine what that is like at such a young age. So Heather goes on to say that when she met him when he was 17, he presented himself as like this carefree, preppy kid wearing a polo and khaki shorts and driving a Jeep Cherokee. She would have never known that he had endured all of this tragedy at such a young age. However, by 1998, he is 16 and is a part of an ATM theft ring where he drains thousands from accounts before banks catch on. So because of this, he's convicted of theft, which is a class 3 felony. But as a first-time offender and a juvenile, he's given grace. Y'all, he's only sentenced to 5 years probation. But before he can be on probation, he does have to serve 3 months in jail and pay $62,000 in restitution, which $62,000, and he's 16. Like, I don't understand how they expected him to pay that, or I couldn't find if he did pay it at all. But assigning $62,000 in restitution to a 16-year-old is beyond me. Like, Arizona is crazy. So by 1999, he's back on the streets and unfortunately back to crime, where he is selling stolen cars coming off of dealership lots. So one day there is an undercover cop at the place where he had people come to buy these stolen cars, and he ends up getting arrested. And not only that, but when he gets arrested, the police label him as a gang member, even though Heather recounts that he's never admitted to being involved in a gang. And his former defense attorney says that in Arizona, when you're charged as a gang member, it gets put into the system that you're a gang member, and your sentence is then much more harsh because of that designation. And I actually did go into the public records in Arizona, and I saw it for myself because I was curious to see how that was going to play out. So I found in the court records, it said that in March of 2000, he's charged with assisting in a criminal syndicate. And literally next to that charge of assisting in a criminal syndicate, there's a backslash and there's a backslash that says also lead gang. So they really put a gang charge next to his assisting in a criminal syndicate, which, I mean, like you said, he's never admitted to. I mean, of course, a gang member wouldn't admit to being in a gang, but they didn't have any type of evidence to suggest that he wasn't a gang. They just threw that on him. So that's crazy. But anyway, so his charges were assisting in a criminal syndicate, trafficking in stolen property, and theft. So by this point, he's 18 and he's not giving any leniency. So he pled guilty to 6 counts and was sentenced to 13 years in prison. His friend Heather said that she thinks that this is the point where everything that we're going to get into in the story starts, because at this point, he starts lying to himself about his situation to the point where he actually believes it. And when he believes it, he's able to get other people to believe it. Because she says she's talking to him, and at this point, he's looking at 11 to 12 years, but he's telling people, no, I'm only going to get 5, which is crazy because, you know, he does get between that 11 and 12. So this is where we pick up in our story. He's released in March 2011 after more than 11 years in prison. And so what does he do when he gets out? He invented a new identity as an investment expert. So now we're getting into the online dating scam, the setup and the scheme and all the things. So, again, in the American Greed episode, when he gets out, he goes to his friend Heather's house because, you know, where else is he going to go? And so he's still has a mindset of an 18-year-old, because when he went in, he's 18. He spends, 11 years out, and it's between 2000 and 2011. And we know at this point, if you can remember, that's when computers and technology and social media and online dating, that's when that really, really started to take off. So when they're having a conversation about, how Daylon wants to meet people, but he doesn't know how, Heather is the one who suggests that he try online dating. And so he's like, but I don't think, do you think people are going to like me? And she's like, well, at this point, he's been in prison. So he's, bulked up, got some weight on him. And she's like, yeah, I think you'll do fine. So in early 2015, Daylon Pierce launched his, let's back up. So initially, when he gets on these sites, he is legitimately, dating. He's not scamming people yet. He's just getting some sugar mamas, basically. He's dating these women. He's their boyfriend, and he's getting them to just buy him whatever he wants, like cars, clothes, all the things. Like, he's living it up on these women's dime. He's not scamming them out of anything. He's just charming them, basically. However, that avenue starts to run dry. They stop giving him money. They start getting upset. They start, cutting him off, basically. And so now he's gotten a taste of money and wealth because he grew up with nothing, and now he has stuff. And so he's like, this is the point where he crosses over from sugar mama over to scamming. So now we are in early 2015. Remember, he got out in 2011, and now we're in 2015. Early 2015, Daylon Pierce launched his romance scam scheme in earnest, okay? He was using the alias Daylon Jung, which is a fake name he sometimes adopted. And he created numerous profiles on popular dating sites and apps. According to the Arizona Attorney General's office, between February 2015 and November 2015, which is not a lot of time, Pierce set up profiles on platforms including Match.com, Plenty of Fish, Tinder, and even niche sites like bbpeoplemeet.com, which is a dating site for plus-sized individuals. So on these profiles, Pierce portrayed himself as the perfect catch. Like, he's handsome, he's successful, he's a businessman, he's living the dream, he's wealthy, he's excited. Like, he is just all the things that a woman would want. And his persona was he claimed to be a wealthy licensed stockbroker and investor with an MBA. Which is what I said earlier. He claimed that he graduated from the University of Michigan, who owned an investment firm called Credit Investment Group, LLC. Impressively, Pierce went so far, y'all, as to register the company with the Arizona Corporation Commission to lend credibility to his story, which is real bold. Because if they had actually looked into him, I don't think the story would have gotten as far as it did. But y'all, that's a whole nother level of delusion. He's knowing he's not about to do nothing, but he's like, let me just go get this LLC real quick and register it for real. So I'm looking at least a little bit credible. He also sometimes invoked other business names. Investigators later found he may have used entities like Rebuild Solutions Group, LLC, and Liongate as part of similar schemes. In online conversations and early dates, Pierce would name drop financial terms, talk about deals, and present himself as a savvy entrepreneur. He created the image of a man who had it all. Like, he drove luxury cars. He had a BMW, a Porsche, a Jeep. He boasted of owning multiple homes that included a place in the affluent Paradise Valley area. So even his friend Heather in the American Greed episode, she said she would ask him, like, Daylon, where's all this money coming from? And he would tell her to just mind her business, which as a friend, I'm like, red flag. Because first of all, am I about to get caught up in something? Because obviously you're doing something shady and you're telling me to mind my own business. I got questions. Anyways, so when the victims visited one of his homes, they saw all the trappings of success. One victim said, quote, he had it all, the closet all organized, all the colored shoes, noting you would never question his setup, end quote. Pierce would even stage phone calls in front of his dates, loudly talking about stock trades or big deals as if he were actively managing portfolios to reinforce the illusion that he was a busy and important financial whiz. Like, this man was going all in, to the point of where he really believed it. Because, like I said, if he believed it, then he can get others to believe it. So he was doing all the things to keep this facade up. And so we later find out that he, as most scammers do, he had a type. He would target certain victims. So with this persona, Pierce cruised dating sites to lure women, and his targets were often single mothers, divorcees, or women nearing retirement. And in the American Greed episode, I think they say that the women were often in a couple categories. I want to say there were 3, but they either just had money right off the bat, like they had 401ks, or they just came from wealth, or they didn't necessarily have the money, but they had a good credit score where then he knew he could, get loans. Or the other one, I feel like there was another category of women that he targeted, and hopefully it'll come back to me, but I can't think of it right now. But I know for sure there were 2 categories. They either had money right off the bat, or they didn't have the money, but they had the credit score. Several of his victims were around their 40s or 50s, although one was 27, I think she says, and financially stable. He specifically looked for women who had good credit or substantial savings. That was the other one, savings. So they either had the money, like liquid money, they had good credit scores, or they had a substantial savings. One victim said, quote, he was very charming, describing how Pierce seemed attentive and caring during the dating phase. But we know he's a scammer. So underneath the romance, his motives were purely financial. As one victim later put it, she eventually realized Pierce was, quote, just searching for women with good credit scores, end quote. So how he got this going is typical manipulation and scammer vibes. He moved fast, which I told you in the first episode, I think, when I gave my scammer story about how he was trying to rush me and move fast, and that's a red flag. Pierce did the same thing. He would move very fast in these relationships. After meeting on the site and going on a few dates, he would quickly gain a woman's trust and affection. He had a repertoire of emotional manipulation tactics. He would shower them with affection and attention, discuss long-term plans, and even promise to help them achieve their own financial goals. Basically, he was love bombing them to like no end, y'all. Like think about love bombing times 100 is basically what it was. For instance, one victim named Tara DeGrazia, who she's come out publicly, which is why we found her actual name, because some women didn't and they use aliases, but she actually came public. She recalled that Pierce asked her orally on about her finances, which whether she could afford a house or a car, and promised, quote, to help her invest her money so that she could pay off her student loans. And I'm getting ahead of myself, but she's actually one of the two who went public or who went to the authorities after she was getting suspicious. She said, quote, I had just gotten a divorce. I was vulnerable and he wowed me. Tara said, explaining how Pierce exploited her emotional state to pull her in. And this pattern repeated itself with multiple women. So here's the pitch. This is how he did it. Once a romantic bond was formed, Pierce would make his move. He pitched his victims on, quote, surefire investment opportunities, insisting he could turn their money into hefty profits. He told women that as a licensed stockbroker, which is a bold lie because there's literally no record ever existing of him ever being a licensed broker, he had inside knowledge and access to exclusive deals. He typically promised returns in the range of $15,000 to $25,000 on their investments, attempting some for ordinary people, which I think I said this too on the first episode. If the return or if the deal seems too good to be true, we hear this all the time, it is. Returns on your investments don't give you that much, do not yield that big of gains that soon. They take time. So if they're telling you, 15 to 25,000 or like 18 to 24% returns, it's a scam. That's not possible. And they also can't guarantee you any type of return because the market is not predictable. So if they're trying to guarantee you a profit or a certain type of number, that's also no. That's a red flag. But for ordinary people, it was very tempting. Sometimes he framed it as helping them out. Like, for example, he suggested that if they invested with him, they could make enough to pay off debts or secure their children's futures. To one woman, he promised that investing with him would generate enough profit to wipe out her credit card debt and even pay for her child's college. Pierce often encouraged victims to pull money from anywhere they could. He instructed some to liquidate retirement accounts, take out home equity or personal loans, or run up credit cards, all under the guise of funneling these funds into high-yield investments that he would manage. Which, if you got to do all this, just wait until you actually have it. If you have to do all of this to invest, it's just not the right time, in my opinion. Although, let me say this too, I am not a financial advisor. I'm not a financial anything. These are just my opinions. So if you're looking to invest and things like that, please talk to someone who's actually licensed and can help you do so. Make sure they have the correct licensing, all of that. I'm just going to make sure I say that. But believing they were making a wise financial move with someone they loved and trusted, the victim sadly complied. One of them that Pierce got to trust him had their money just taken. And sadly, once Pierce had their money, the reality of the situation set in. So the fraudulent investments. In truth, Pierce had never had any intention of investing a dime, which in the American Greed episode, he said that he initially did plan to, but there was no evidence of him ever setting up any type of investment. They couldn't find anything. So he was running a classic fraudulent scheme using romance as the hook. The money he collected from his victims was straight into financing his extravagant lifestyle, which was casinos, nightclubs, strip clubs, luxury goods, expensive rent. Y'all, this American Greed episode, they was spilling all the tea. They said one woman gave him over $100,000. I think it was like $195,000. They said in 1 month's time, he had spent all of that $194,000. I think it's like 2 days after she gave it to him, he had spent like $5,000, and it would just go on and go on and go on, and he would just spend the money. And Heather said that he would go to the casinos and just there would be a line of machines. He would throw $200 to $300 per machine all the way down the line and go and hit the buttons just to see what he could get. And he blew $194,000 in a month. I'm speechless that you could spend that much money in such a short amount of time. But I guess when it's other people's money, you don't really think about it like that because you didn't work for it. So that part just really blew my mind. But all the while, he strung the women along with lies. He would show fake paperwork of stock purchases or send text updates claiming the investment was growing. He even sent selfies from private planes and upscale venues pretending he was traveling for business or entertaining clients to maintain the illusion that he was hard at work growing their money. But he wasn't. He literally wasn't. Quote, "He had an answer for absolutely everything," said victim Sarah Schroeder, who noted that, quote, "You would have never thought he was saying," quote, "You never would have thought what he was saying was false." He had that charm. He had the ability to he seriously conned you and got you to believe everything he was saying because, again, he believed it. So in his mind, it wasn't a lie. But behind the scenes, Pierce was robbing these women blind and breaking their hearts. According to prosecutors, over the course of his con, he bilked more than, listen y'all, $1 million in total from his dates. I think they said, later they confirmed that it was around $1.8 million between 2013 and 2016, which is crazy. He funneled the cash into paying for a BMW, a Porsche, a Jeep, and upscale residences, among other splurges. And then Heather also said that because he grew up in nothing, he was very generous. So he would take care of people. Like he would help people supply or help people provide for their families. But one of his victims was like, yeah, he's taking care of your family with my money, though, which I understand. Like, this is my money. I feel sorry for you and your family situation, but that's my money. I didn't authorize him to use my money to help your family. That's not what it was for. So in essence, each new victim's money helped sustain the facade of wealth that he then used to impress the next victim, which is a Ponzi-like pattern of using new money to prop up prior lies. It's also worth noting that Pierce's deception extended beyond convincing women to just hand over cash. In some cases, he committed identity theft, which is crazy, by opening credit lines in his victims' names without their knowledge. Victims later discovered that while they were waiting for their investments, loosely said, to pay off, Pierce had secretly taken out loans or credit cards under their name, maxing them out and leaving them on the hook. This compounded the damage. Not only did victims lose money they gave him, but some were left with wrecked credit scores, foreclosed homes, repossessed cars, and even bankruptcy as a result of debts he racked up in their names. So let's get into the victims' stories of the heartbreak and financial ruin. By the time authorities caught up with Pierce, 13 women from the Phoenix, Scottsdale area had been identified as victims of his online dating scam. Their individual stories vary, but all share a common thread, a mix of emotional betrayal and devastating financial loss. So here are a few notable examples based on publicly available accounts. So we're going to call her Julie. It's not her real name. These are all pseudonyms unless they are the two women who came public with it. So Julie, which again, not her real name, is the 401k investor. So Julie met Pierce on a dating site and was taken in by his stockbroker persona. Believing in his investment acumen, she liquidated her entire 401k retirement account, handing $94,000 in cash to Pierce to invest in her future. He then urged her to go further, like $94,000 wasn't enough. But incredibly, she took out a personal loan on top of that to give him even more. So in total, she invested approximately $240,000 with Pierce, including her life savings and new debt. All of that money vanished. It later came out that the address Pierce had given for his credit investment group office was actually an empty house, a complete sham. Julie not only lost her retirement nest egg, but also wound up deep in debt that she would have to repay herself. Then we have Michelle, who again is an anonymous woman, the debt consolidator. So Michelle fell for Pierce's charm and financial promises, hoping to solve her existing financial troubles. At his persuasion, she gave him nearly $100,000, about half of which she borrowed via a loan, thinking his investments would yield enough profit to pay off that loan and then some. Which again, if you're using a loan to fund an investment, you don't need to make the investment. But again, I'm not a financial advisor. Instead, Pierce pocketed the money. Michelle was left not only without the funds she had before, but now she was saddled with a large loan debt that Pierce never actually invested for her as promised. Her plan to become debt-free backfired horribly, leaving her in an even worse position than she was before she met him. Then we have Tara DeGrazia, which is her actual name because she came public. She was vulnerable and wild. Tara has bravely shared her story publicly. She was newly divorced and looking for a fresh start when she met Pierce and was quickly swept off her feet. He asked detailed questions about her finances and credit, which in hindsight was a red flag, and pitched himself as someone who could help improve her situation. Tara recalls that Pierce promised to grow her money so she could eliminate her student loan debt. Although specific figures Tara invested in her public, she was one of the 13 victims included in the case. She said, quote, "I was vulnerable and he wowed me," end quote. She admitted, emphasizing how easily his smooth talk dismantled her better judgment. Tara was fortunate, though, to recognize the fraud earlier than some, and she cooperated with authorities during the investigation, helping to ensure Pierce was brought to justice. Then we have Rose Reddy, who was a six-figure loss. Rose is another victim who chose to speak out. She met Pierce on Match.com and went on a few dates, after which she was convinced to invest a staggering sum. In court, Rose revealed that she had $425,000. Again, $425,000 lost in an instant to Pierce's scam. Which, if I have $425,000 to invest, again, I'm not victim shaming, but if I have $425,000 to invest, I'm taking you through all the ringers. I'm not just handing over that much money to somebody I just met, especially when I met you on a dating site. That's crazy to me. But again, not victim shaming. This likely represents the largest single loss among his victims that we know of. Rose had thought she was making a sound investment for her family's future. Instead, she found herself unable to pay for her daughter's college because that money was gone, which is really sad. Rose testified about how convincing Pierce was. He was on the phone, working deals, listening to him talk and be so courteous and nice to other investors. She was quoted saying, she recounted, describing one scene where Pierce performed his fake stockbroker act in front of her. He also took her to an impressive home and showed off designer clothes and rows of shoes, all to make her believe he was a real deal. Which, again, I've heard if people have money, they don't flaunt it and show it off like that. But I wouldn't know. Rose's trust unfortunately cost her dearly. She told the court that because of Pierce, quote, I couldn't send my daughter to college, end quote, and she labeled him a predator who, quote, went to great lengths to make his scam believable, end quote, which, again, he did go to great lengths. Like, he was really playing that role. Then we have Sarah Schroeder, duped by details. She was another one who I believe went public. She was another victim who fell for his, quote, being constantly on the phone, end quote, cultivating the image of a jet-setting financier. He even sent her pictures of himself on private airplanes, claiming he was off meeting big clients. Sarah ended up giving Pierce a large sum, although not publicly quantified, and even had fraudulent loans taken out in her name by Pierce. She only discovered the truth when creditors came after her. Sarah spoke at Pierce's sentencing saying, quote, it feels like we've kind of won, in a sense. Finally being able to see him in handcuffs was very liberating, end quote. Her relief at sentencing, at seeing justice served, was palpable after the nightmare he put her through. Other victims. In total, 13 victims ranging in age from their 30s to 60s were identified, and their losses collectively were tallied in the indictment and court records. Some have remained anonymous publicly. All experienced a double trauma, the emotional heartbreak of learning the relationship was a lie, and the financial disaster that often left them in dire straits. Many of these women had to face friends and family to explain that they had been conned. Some feared embarrassment or blame, which is one reason romance scams are often underreported. It was only after Pierce's fraud became public via his arrest that many of them realized they weren't alone. He had done this to many others following a nearly identical script each time. Impact on the victims. The toll on Pierce's victims was immense. Financially, several faced years or decades of rebuilding. Retirement funds were wiped out. New debts piled on. Credit ruined. Psychologically, they suffered humiliation, anxiety, and depression. As one official noted, quote, online dating scams can have devastating financial and emotional effects on victims, end quote. Victims often blame themselves for falling for the scam, even though the fraudsters are extremely adept at manipulation. In this case, Pierce's victims showed courage by coming forward to law enforcement and later by sharing their cautionary tales publicly to warn others. Their cooperation was key in stopping Pierce from claiming even more victims. So what I have a hard time with, though, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, because we're about to get into the investigation and unraveling the con. But it's been mentioned thus far in the show how some victims had loans taken out in their names, and Pierce committed identity theft with that. I'm struggling, though, because in the American Greed episode, one of them, I think it was Tara, maybe, who said this. It was either Tara or Sarah. It was Sarah. Okay. I believe it was Sarah who said that when he convinced them to apply for loans to get more money, Pierce was going in and padding their applications with false information. And she said he told them, like, okay, so when the banks call, you just have to verify this information. So they were essentially lying with him, like, this information isn't true, but you're verifying and saying that it is true. And then another one said that she honestly didn't even look at the applications until afterwards, and she saw how much money it was. So they're just putting so much trust in him that they're lying for him and not even verifying and checking what he's saying that he's doing, which I can't, again, not victim blaming, I just can't fathom that happening or me being again, that was just an interesting situation to hear. But getting into the investigation, Pierce's scheme began to fall apart in late 2015 when some of the women, growing suspicious or frustrated by the lack of real returns, reported him to law enforcement. The Arizona Attorney General's office and the Phoenix field office of the FBI launched a joint investigation into the man behind these online dating investment scams. Given the multi-jurisdictional nature, including victims across the Phoenix metro area, and the financial aspects, the case was handled at the state level by Arizona's fraud unit in collaboration with federal agents. So here are key steps and discoveries in the investigation. So we have victim reports and patterns. Initially, it appeared one or two women came forward to police in late 2015 or early 2016, which prompted investigators to look into Pierce. Once the case became public, many more victims were identified. In June 2016, Pierce was arrested by Scottsdale police with FBI assistance on suspicion of fraud. At the time of his first arrest, only a couple of victims might have been known. News of the arrest was reported locally, and detectives expressed concern that more victims were likely out there given Pierce's pattern, which proved to be true because 11 additional women came forward after seeing reports of Pierce's arrest, bringing the total known victims to 13. Then we have the financial forensics, which I think financial forensics and what's the other one? Forensic psychology. I feel like those two would be really dope field to get into. But anyways, so the financial forensics. Investigators dug into Pierce's finances and quickly saw the fraudulent nature of his loosely stated investments. They found no evidence of any stock accounts or legitimate investment actively by Pierce. The Arizona Cooperation Commission confirmed that while Pierce had registered Credit Investment Group LLC, it was essentially a shell. The listed business address was a vacant home, and neighbors attested they'd never seen any business operating there. Bank records showed that money from victims, once in Pierce's hands, was spent at casinos, high-end retailers, and nightlife venues, not placed into any brokerage or investment fund. Which, again, going back to that American Greed episode, they said that he celebrated his birthday at a club and he would go out with like 100 people, and the clubs would see him with all of these credit cards with women's names on them, but not question them because, it's money. And he said on his birthday, this man got bottle service for the entire club. I've never had bottle service before, but isn't it like $300 a bottle or maybe more than that? Like, bottle service for the entire club is nasty work. Like, nasty. And that's just how he would spend the money. Then we get into the evidence of deception. Investigators likely collected emails, text messages, and voicemails Pierce sent to victims about their supposed investments, which would later serve as evidence of his false pretenses. One of the victims, either Sarah or Tara in American Greed, said that she literally just handed over everything she had. They also uncovered identity theft, for instance, loan applications in victims' names that they had not personally made. Surveillance might have caught Pierce frequenting casinos during times he told victims he was meeting clients. All this helped build a clear picture of his scam. Then we have criminal associates. A surprising twist emerged when investigators learned Pierce's criminal activity might extend beyond the romance scam. In August 2016, while out on bond after his initial arrest, which again, if they let you out on bond, don't make them mad by still committing crimes. Pierce was implicated in a separate fraud involving credit cards of deceased individuals. Another fraudster, Jason Sibir Thomas, was caught illegally adding himself as an authorized user on a dead person's credit card. And he had given one of those cards to Daylon Pierce. Now, in American Greed, Heather kind of tries to downplay it, and she says that Daylon was in the car with Jason. Jason had a credit card, handed the credit card to Daylon, who was in the passenger seat, and Daylon then in turn handed it to the young lady who got caught at this really expensive hotel giving a party. And the party was so loud that they eventually kicked them out. And then that's when they discovered that the credit card she used to pay for it was fraudulent. So this suggests Pierce may have been looking for additional illicit funds or was helping a cohort commit fraud. While Pierce's main indictment did not focus on this credit card scheme, it underscores that even while under investigation, he was dabbling in other crimes, a testament of his relentless fraud-minded behavior. Then there is a law enforcement sting possibility. Although not explicitly detailed in news sources, it's common in romance scam investigations to attempt to sting or control meat. For instance, agents might have had one of the victims arrange a meeting with Pierce under the pretense of giving him more money to catch him in the act. Given that Pierce was indeed arrested in 2016 and caught in the valley, as one headline put it, it's possible that police managed to nab him with evidence on hand. Perhaps he showed up to collect a check or cash and was taken into custody. At the very least, they moved quickly once they had probable cause, given the risk that Pierce could flee. He certainly had the funds to do so. And so then we get to his arrest. Pierce was arrested on a Saturday in mid-2016, and reports suggest it was around June 2016. He did post bond and was released pending trial shortly after that arrest, which is not unusual for white-collar crimes. However, with the growing list of victims and evidence, prosecutors were building a heavy case against him. By January 2017, a state grand jury formally indicted Daylon G. Pierce on, get this, y'all, 29 felony counts related to the scam. The indictment, which I did go through, which is only like 4 pages, it was real quick. But the indictment included a wide array of charges reflecting the many facets of Pierce's con. So the fraudulent schemes and artifices was 1 count, a Class 2 felony. This is a broad Arizona charge for orchestrating a scheme to defraud. Then you have theft, 13 counts in total, I'm assuming for each one of the women he defrauded. 10 counts, Class 2 felony theft, 3 counts, Class 3 felony theft, each count likely yet corresponding to stealing large amounts from different women. Then we have illegal control of an enterprise, 2 counts, Class 3 felonies, essentially running a criminal enterprise, which was his fake investment operation. And then transactions by an unregistered securities dealer or salesman, 13 counts, Class 4 felonies for selling investment opportunities without being licensed, matching the 13 victims. This indicates he was treated as selling securities fraudulently, which again, you need to make sure if you're trying to make investments that you are seeing someone who is licensed in securities, okay? Securities and annuities. But anyways, these charges show that authorities viewed Pierce's romance scam as not just individual thefts, but as a coordinated enterprise and a financial securities crime. At the time of indictment, the Attorney General even put out a Valentine's Day warning in February 2017, highlighting Pierce's case to caution others about romance scams. Then we have manhunt concerns. Given Pierce's resources and prior criminal knowledge, authorities were keen to ensure he didn't flee. The Attorney General's office actually publicized Pierce's alias, Daylon Jung, and asked that, quote, if anyone has information on Daylon G. Pierce, a.k.a. Daylon Jung, please contact the Arizona Attorney General's office, end quote. This unusual step implied concern that Pierce might be on the run or hiding assets. Thankfully, Pierce remained available for prosecution, likely because he knew the evidence was overwhelming and any attempt to flee would turn a white-collar case into a manhunt. So now let's get into the court proceedings, which is the trial, plea, and the day of reckoning. Initially, Daylon Pierce pleaded not guilty to the charges in early 2017, as is common. Had the case gone to trial, prosecutors were prepared with a long lineup of victim witnesses and documentation of his fraud. However, facing the mountain of evidence and the prospect of decades in prison if convicted on all counts, Pierce eventually chose to accept a plea bargain, which was smart. In mid-2017, Pierce pleaded guilty to 2 counts of fraudulent schemes and artifices, which is Class 2 felonies. As part of the plea deal, the remaining counts, theft, security frauds, etc., were likely dismissed, streamlining the case. Pierce acknowledged that he had defrauded over a dozen women of large sums of money. Sentencing was left to the judge within an agreed range. In Arizona, a Class 2 felony can carry a significant prison term, especially with prior felonies on record, which is Pierce's criminal history meant he was not eligible for a light sentence. So the sentencing hearing took place on August 11, 2017. This was the day Pierce's victims had waited for, a chance to confront the man who betrayed them and see him face justice. The courtroom in Phoenix was packed with victims, some of their family members, investigators, and the media. By now, Pierce was roughly 40 years old and once again wearing jailhouse orange, a far cry from the designer suits he'd worn on dates. Several victims gave impact statements standing before the judge and Pierce to describe what he had done to their lives. Some emotional testimonies. Women spoke through tears about the humiliation and devastation Pierce caused. They recounted how he, quote, told all the right things to gain their trust, end quote, only to wreck their futures. Rose Reedy talked about the $425,000 she lost and the opportunities stolen from her family. Sarah Schroeder described the extensive lies he told and how none of them ever doubted him until it was too late. Some described struggling to pay bills or keep their homes after what he did. These statements were not only cathartic for the victims, but they also served to underscore to the judge the gravity of Pierce's crimes and the lasting harm done. He did apologize, however. When it was his turn to speak, Daylon Pierce addressed the court and his victims. In a contrite tone, he apologized and said he, quote, takes full responsibility, end quote, for his actions. Quote, if I could have avoided this and taken it back, I would, Pierce said. I'm sorry, end quote. He told the women he hoped they would find it in their hearts to forgive him someday. Some victims later said his apology rang hollow. They felt he was only sorry because he got caught, noting that he had continued lying right up until the end. Indeed, coming from a man who had made a living off deceit, the apology did little to erase their pain. It might, however, have been a tactical move hoping for a bit of leniency. Then we get to the sentence, which is a sentence, y'all. Judge Douglas Gerlach, I'm pretty sure I said his name wrong, as noted in records, delivered the sentence. 15.75 years in state prison, which is 15 years and 9 months. A significant term for fraud. It was, in fact, near the maximum allowed under the plea. Attorney General Mark Bornvich, whose office prosecuted the case, praised the outcome, stating, quote, Daylon Pierce is a career criminal and a con man who deserves to be locked up, end quote. He lamented that, quote, unfortunately, online dating scams are becoming more common, end quote, and said his office would continue to work with the FBI to catch perpetrators like Pierce. In another statement, he didn't mince words, calling Pierce, quote, a scumbag who took advantage of people and he manipulated them, end quote. This blunt condemnation from Arizona's top prosecutor underscored how egregious Pierce's actions were in the eyes of law enforcement. The FBI special agent in charge, Michael Daylon, also weighed in, noting that this case demonstrated the commitment of authorities to prosecute those who exploit victims through romance scams. The 15.75-year sentence was to be served in the Arizona Department of Corrections. Given Pierce's prior felonies, it's likely he must serve a minimum of 85% of the term before any possibility of release. Arizona requires most felons to serve at least 85% if they behave in prison. This means Pierce will be behind bars well into the 2020s and possibly into the early 2030s, ensuring he cannot victimize anyone else in the near future. As far as restitution, the judge scheduled a restitution hearing for a later date. This is a separate proceeding to determine how much money Pierce legally owes his victims. With 13 victims and losses over $1 million, one could expect a restitution order in the seven figures. Indeed, the AG's office indicated such a hearing was pending. However, collecting restitution is another story. As one news report noted, it's unlikely the victims will get all or even most of their money back. Pierce had squandered the funds on gambling and luxuries, and any tangible assets he bought, cars, etc., may have been seized or liquidated by authorities, but would cover only a fraction of total losses. Still, as a matter of law, he can be ordered to pay restitution, a debt that would follow him even after prison, garnishing any income he earns. When the gavel came down, Daylon Pierce was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs to begin his long prison term. For his victims, seeing him in chains offered a measure of justice. Quote, it is great, said Sarah Schroeder after the sentencing. It feels like we've kind of won. Finally being able to see him in handcuffs was very liberating, end quote. The case was a clear message that even cunning romance scammers can be caught and punished. Okay, this episode is longer than I intended. So I had some other information I wanted to give, but I think I'm going to start to wrap it up because it's getting long. This is the sip or spill segment, and then we're gonna go ahead and end it. But was Daylon Pierce just a player or a predator? So it's time for sip or spill. Where I stopped sipping my iced latte along to drop a hot take. So let's get into it. Was Daylon Pierce just a smooth-talking player who got in over his head, or was he a predator who preyed on vulnerability from the jump? So I'm going to go ahead and spill because this wasn't a dude who got caught up. This was intentional. He was very calculated. He used lies, romance, and fake investments, the whole persona, the fake phone calls, the fake private airplanes. Like, he knew what he was doing, okay? This wasn't messy dating drama. This was criminal. It started off messy dating drama when he had the sugar mamas, but then he crossed over into criminal, okay? So, and then we have all the people saying, the women should have known better. I don't know, because if he was as smooth talking as they say he was, I could see how they got caught up. So, I don't know. What do y'all think? Was it just a scam or something way more sinister? So let's drop your comments on IG or on Spotify, okay? Because I want to know what y'all think. So before we get out of here, I'm going to quickly read reviews because y'all are making my day with these reviews. So if you listen on Apple, they let you leave reviews. If not, leave a comment on Spotify and it might get read at the end of an episode. So, this one is a 5-star rating. It says engaging. I don't know who this is from, but it says, this podcast had me hooked in from the moment it started. I laughed with Jasmine and was talking along with her like we were in a conversation listening to the stories. 10 out of 10 recommend. That just, especially because I don't know who it is, like, that just makes my heart so, I literally smiled reading that. Okay, and then I'm just going to pick a random comment. Okay, this one is from the Ayana Bean episode from last week. I'm trying to read the name, but you got all these cute you got your name all cute, so I can't really read it, but I think it says Dark Capricorn Rose, hopefully. She said, I just get the most ick feeling from her, like the feeling you get when an ex-pimp turned preacher starts that BS of how they changed in front of the congregation while selling coke out in the parking lot of Dunkin' Donuts maybe with one of his side chicks. Just ick. I'm weak, girl. Do you got the ick from Mayana? That's hilarious. But yeah, so I read a comment from Spotify and a rating from Apple. So if you want to hear yours read too, go ahead and leave it, and you might hear it at the end of one of the episodes. But like I said, this is long, so we are going to get out of here. That is a wrap on this week's episode of Black Coffee, Crime, and Crochet. If you learned something, felt something, or found yourself stitching with your jaw on the floor, please do me a favor. And like I said, leave a comment, a review at all the places. You can visit my website, Black Coffee, Crime, and Crochet, for all the sources, transcripts, anything like that. Please subscribe, share it with a friend, leave a review. It literally helps people find me. And then note that this is an independent podcast. It's hosted by me, and it's produced and mixed by my husband, Latarius Prince, who also does the beats. So until next time, stay cozy, stay curious, and maybe keep a little side eye on that stockbroker in your DMs. All right? Bye, besties.
Disclaimer. Great effort is made to ensure that all materials used in Black Coffee, Crime, and Crochet adhere to fair use guidelines. No copyright infringement is intended. If you are the copyright owner or represent the owner of any material used in this content and have concerns about its use, please contact me and I will promptly address the issue.